Hello and welcome to TLL TV. My name is Taryn. I'll be your host today. In light of recent events involving overzealous security at Kogarah, we're going to delve into issues surrounding women's active support and the future that we want to create together. Firstly, I'd like to take the time to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands in which we are recording today. For me, that's Wurundjeri country in Melbourne, and acknowledge elders past, present and emerging. So on the panel today, we have Simon from Victory Vikings. Simon, how are you doing?
Good, thanks.
Good to hear. We also have the wonderful Claire from Jets Women's Active. How are you doing? Just smiles.
Hey,
all good.
Good, thanks.
All the way from sunny Queensland, we have Madge from Raw Cause. How are you?
Hey, I'm going really well.
Wonderful. And finally, we have Michelle, serial pest at the Ladies League, and Ultra from the Cove. How are you doing?
I'm great. And I am not a serial pest. I resent that comment.
So Michelle, let's start with you. So I'm sure a lot of people watching are familiar with what happened last week at the Sydney FC game against Perth. But for those that aren't familiar, can you just give us a quick rundown of what happened?
Yeah, basically just some heavy-handed security guards. It was a nightmare from the start. I always checked for ID for my drum that I brought in that the club already knows about. And then I was thrown out of the stadium right at the end of the game for standing on a chair briefly for maybe about 10 seconds.
Fair enough. Is this the first time you've ever been thrown out?
Yes, surprisingly, the first time I've ever been kicked out of anywhere, in fact.
Yeah, and I think the thing that was shocking about it for everyone was it just seemed completely out of order and completely out of line with what you were doing. There didn't seem to be a reason for it. And I guess that's why it sort of sparked the outrage and concern that it has over the last few days. So Madge, I wanted to throw to you first. You've been involved in Women's Active for a really long time. Have you ever heard of anything like this happening in the women's game, and does it shock you at all?
I do find it shocking because I can't say that we've ever had too many issues with the Raw Corps. I mean, back in the Suncorp days, you could sometimes, and when we had double headers, but we had a pretty good relationship with the club and we got our access passes and we were able to go in and set up early. But, I mean, occasionally you'd have, a security guard being like, oh, you've got banners on the seat or something. But never anything too bad. And I guess I don't know why that was. I guess we've always had a fairly distinct identity ourselves. We never used to really set up in the same area as, say, the men's active. So I don't know if that's just having that different identity possibly meant that we didn't get some of the same heavy-handed treatment. I know some of the that the Den have complained about that at Suncorp before. But I mean, at our standalone games, never an issue. Never an issue at our standalone games. And even at Redcliffe, we haven't had any issues either. So we've been really grateful. But then we've also always had respectful relationships with the clubs and with security, anyone that's working the game. That when we go in and set up, it's also about making sure that you're building relationships as an organisation with the people that you have to work with, week in, week out.
Yeah, 100%. And we definitely will talk more as today goes on about the differences with having a separate identity to the men's game and how that sort of plays out in these sorts of situations. But of course, security is kind of it's a vexed issue. Last month, different country, different environment, but in a Women's Champions League game involving Chelsea and Juventus, the women's football community was shocked by a pitch invader that was basically being allowed to run on the ground for as long as he wanted. And at the time, there were calls for heightened security in women's football. However, the consequences of that can then be seen perhaps in what happened to Michelle. So we kind of need to find a middle ground between protecting players and protecting supporters while also fostering an active environment. Claire, what are your experiences at the Jets and how can we find that balance moving forward?
Yeah, look, again, you know, what happened to Michelle, it's not something that I've never experienced. Our group have never experienced heavy-handed security at home games. Certainly when we play at McDonald Jones Stadium double headers, you know, they're not expecting big crowds for the women's game. So generally the security is quite thin on the ground. As the crowds establish for the men's game, there's an increase in security because there's an increase in attendees, and also the men's active set up. So I have seen security certainly hovering around them a lot more than they have been around us. Standalone games at number 2, absolutely no issues whatsoever. We get to, you know, they know we're coming. Couple of seasons we've been doing it there. Generally, sometimes the same guards, the same staff. They recognises there's no big dramas. I think it's a hard balance. I think that certainly, I think men's active historically has a poor reputation. I think there's an expectation that there'll be trouble. I think that people generally look at, you know, what active looks like in Europe. There's maybe a lack of understanding. They just think yobs, riots, setting off flares, breaking up chairs, causing trouble. And I haven't seen any of that at games. Any games that I've been to, I haven't seen that from. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but I haven't seen it certainly. I think there's an expectation as supporters how we behave at games. I think we expect that there may be things that we're challenged on. Certainly when we do away games, security, they won't let us set up our banners until they double check that we've definitely got permission. So there's a chain of, I guess, verification for that. So, you know, it's not problematic, but certainly you can feel sometimes like, you know, there's a thin line between them doing their job and maybe having a little bit of power in that situation. Depends on the individual staff as well. I don't want to generalize. So it's tricky. I think having good connections with your club, I think also an understanding from security at the venues, and having that kind of between the club and security and venues, having someone who's there, hopefully would minimise any of these issues. And I think for the police to be involved in a situation, it just, yeah, it's quite unbelievable that they would be involved. So yeah, look, I think it's hard, but I think that if you haven't done anything that warrants that sort of intervention, I think that's a really negative experience, and certainly something that needs to be looked at.
I guess a general question and a follow-up for you, Claire. Do you guys find this is more of an issue in double headers compared to standalone games?
Yeah, look, McDonald Jones Stadium, again, for us, they know we're coming. They know that there's a WJets active group. They'll do the usual checks, but we get to go through. Number 2, it's a breeze. We get to go through, no problem. The issue for us, I guess, is just more around when we're playing at those double headers, that we don't have a lot of time to actually set ourselves up before kick-off, and security does take a bit of time, and someone's got a checklist going through our gear, which is all fine. I understand that. But double headers, they expect a bigger crowd, different security, I think, as well, probably at number 2 compared to McDonald Jones. So yeah, I think double headers, certainly. It's a big stadium. There'll be more security. There's going to be more attendees. Yeah, so I think potentially they're expecting some sort of trouble, but not from us. You know, yeah, that's not, you know, culturally, that's not what we do. We're there to have a good time, bit of fun.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess, you know, let's talk a little bit about like culture and the culture of the women's active compared to in the men's game. So Simon, I wanted to throw to you for this. So, you know, the Victory Vikings, like most groups represented in this roundtable, minus Michelle with the Cove, are set up sort of specifically for the women's game. Do you think that the culture of active support in the women's game means that in order to grow, we sort of need to look outside of these existing structures in the men's game? You know, do you see things like double headers as inhibiting that culture?
I definitely do feel double headers can be quite inhibiting. It's like from an active support point of view in the women's community, it's a lot more about like trying to build a kind of sense of community. So like so talking from a Vikings perspective, our kind of goal is to say, hey, if you're coming to a game and we'll say, like, you might be by yourself, but you're uncertain about coming, know that there'll be fans there that, you can sit to. You don't have to interact with us if you don't want to. That's cool, but, it's just that there's some kind of people there. Where double headers can kind of really inhibit that culture is, like, for a start, it can be like very rushed. So, you might get like half an hour kind of before the gates are open or whatever, and people kind of, get shunted into general admission. And historically, like, a lot of people in women's game prefer to kind of sit on the sidelines because you get a good view and you're kind of used to that. I think also it can be a bit off-putting, like, if you're coming to Amy Park and it holds 30,000 people and, you're only going to have about maybe like 500 people there for the dub, that kind of like can inhibit people from like also kind of attending and interacting because like you're quite removed, I guess, from the ground, like, from the play in that sense when you're used to the kind of the more suburban grounds. But then again, Melbourne is tricky because there's not really a lot of suitable venues as soon as you drop down from Amy. So I think, that really kind of like complicates things, whatever. But I think the biggest challenge, certainly from our perspective with Vikings is kind of getting through to people that, like, we might make some noise at games, we've got the drum, whatever, and all that. But, we're not really fussed if you don't want to join in. We just want to try and have a group of people that can there, just to watch the game together and have a good laugh and make lots of Simpsons references.
We love the Simpsons references with the Vikings. It's always a highlight. I guess I wanted to hear from everyone now, but we can start with Michelle for this one. Family friendly. So active support is something that by design is loud. It's fun. It's a hell of a lot of fun when you get involved with your team. You make lots of noise. There's obviously that line between sort of personal aggression and just sort of getting into the game. What do you see in terms of the women's game that might be inhibiting active support in terms of wanting more like family friendly values? What do you think about that?
I hate family friendly anything. I'm not a very family friendly person. But look, I think one of the problems is that they've marketed this game so much to bring your kids to the game, and then that means we'll have chants that are, let's go Sydney, like primary school chants, because the little girls, that's what they want to sing, because that's what they know to do at primary school, athletics carnivals. And so there's never been, especially at Sydney Games, there's never really been an active group that's been committed to being there every single week. So no, there's not really been anyone to show those kids who want to be involved in an active that, like, we've got songs that we do sing and this is how we sing them and you can be a part of it. But like a lot of the time the parents don't let them go into those areas because it's active and it's just a bunch of boys, and I can see from the outside like how that might be like, maybe let's not let our 7-year-old daughter go hang out with a bunch of 20-year-old men. I can see why they would not want that. But that's why I'm there as well, which is what I'm trying to grow, is something, a very different sort of look of what the men's cove is. It's not the same. But yeah, the issue is that this game has just been marketed towards children, and that's been an issue from the start. And when I like to go to games, I like to just be myself, I want to have a couple of drinks and enjoy myself. But it's like, I feel like as such a strange person as an adult being at these games. Sometimes it feels so weird when you walk around and all that there is just children. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if that answered your question, but that's my answer.
For me, family friendly doesn't have to mean you sanitize the product. I think like family friendly to me means it's an environment where it's safe to take your family. And I would argue, anyone to argue that go into a dub game isn't safe, whatever, and they don't want to join in active, whatever, and all that, that's fine. But you don't have to go sanitising the product just to make it family friendly.
It's also about, one of the main things at the Raw Call when we established ourselves is we did want to establish ourselves as separate from what the historically active had been seen as. We wanted it to be a place that was explicitly welcome to women, to people of any gender, any sexual orientation, any color, religion, or ethnic origin. And unfortunately, when you have active that is that can sometimes be focused on the negative and aggressive banter, by definition, that can sometimes exclude people, and often does exclude people. So we set ourselves up wanting to be explicitly inclusive. And so by design, that meant that we weren't going to have sexist chants. We weren't going to have chants that involved disparaging people with disabilities, which have been common in active support over the years. So we were very, very explicit about the type of active that we wanted. But then that doesn't mean that we don't drink. It doesn't mean we have some beers, but as part of our charter, basically it's don't be a douche. Don't have one drink too many and start being an absolute dickhead. Can I swear? Because
so, go for it.
If we're not going to be family friends.
No Fs. No Fs or Cs. No Fs or Cs.
And look, Madge, I agree. What you've said, that's our experience as well. Having active support for our W team, for us, the priority was providing that safe and inclusive space that even for women, like even myself, I've never always felt comfortable going to a men's game. You sit there and you hear stuff that's been shouted that is right beside you that is about women. It's sexist or it's homophobic, or it's just, you don't want to be around that. It doesn't feel safe. It's a different energy that the men generate at those games, and they do their thing and we do ours. And I'm not pointing fingers at any active support groups. I've just heard it at various games across the country. So for us to create that safe and inclusive space where there's an expectation around behaviour, what's acceptable, what's not. And like Madge and the Viking guys, we like a couple of beers, we like banter, good humoured banter, it's fun, it's a good experience. But we've got a big emphasis on it being a positive experience as well. Like, we're not going to shout at our own team on the pitch that they're crap, we're not going to turn our back on the team when they're 5 goals down. It's about supporting the team fundamentally, but also making it a really positive game day experience. And with that, yes, we get families. We get a whole lot of families with a whole lot of kids. And I've got no issue. Like, I've watched some of these kids grow up over the last 3 years, and and they're always at the game. They turn up for the game. They're there. They interact, and I give them a job. You go and you wave the flag when the team come out, or you go and bring some more kids over, more people over, and let's make some noise. I think there's a lot of positives from having that really diverse mix of people. We have people with disabilities, psychosocial disability, people, mental illness. We have a lot of queer people in our group. Again, it's a safe space. Everybody's welcome. And a lot of women as well, and a lot of men as well, absolutely welcome. But we have an expectation that there's a behaviour that we expect. We have strong leadership in our group. We set by example. We challenge and call out bad behaviour. And in light of what happened for Josh Cavallo at Adelaide, I think that's incredibly important that you set that example.
Yeah, and I think we have an opportunity as women's football fans to create something unique that's ours. And I think it does, look, I can only speak for myself. It certainly grates on me when there is an attitude of, in order to grow the game, it needs to come from the men's game. I'm a big advocate for, well, in order to grow the game, we can attract different audiences that have felt maybe marginalized or have felt like they can't be a part of the men's game. And I think what you guys are talking about really like speaks to that. You know, it can be fun, it can be loud, it can be banter, you know, it can be adults having a beer or two at the game. But at the end of the day, that doesn't need to involve some of the negative stuff that does come from the men's game. I guess, Michelle, in that case, I would just throw back to you as sort of the one representative of the code that does go across both the men's and women's game. I know we've had conversations in the past about, you know, how you talk to these boys and get them involved in the women's game, and sort of have to, you know, very gently explain things to them sometimes. How do you see the Cove growing in the women's space specifically?
Yeah, well, we've got within the Cove at the men's games, they have their own little group, as they have another group there that is about like leadership and, you know, making sure that they're the ones who set up the banners, set up the flags, all that stuff, right? So they've got a little group of boys, and they're quite young. You know, some of them are still in high school, some of them you know, just finished school, so they're quite like young kids who want to be involved in stuff. So there's a group of them, and our men's leader will message them and say, hey, there's a women's game, who's going, come to the game, right? Which is great, right? But sometimes what I find is if you're forcing these boys to come to the games, they don't want to be involved because they don't want to go. And that's not really helping grow active in women's, because they don't want to be there. So they're not going to sing, they're not going to do anything. And I've tried to have this conversation so many times where it's like, if you don't want to be here, you don't have to. No one's forcing you. I'm not telling you to stay here. In fact, I'm telling you to go if you're not going to sing, because that's how it is. This is active support. You don't get to sit here and pick and choose when you're going to do something, okay? Because we don't get to do that in the men's game, so you don't get to do that here. You don't get to disrespect the girls like that. You don't get to disrespect me like that. And I'm trying to have these conversations, and they're still coming to the games, which is fine, but like, go sit on the grandstand if you don't want to sing. That's fine. I have no issues with them sitting in the grandstand. But yeah, sometimes I have to have not so gentle conversations as well during the games. I've had to, what I found is we have to do baby steps with these boys. You know, they're little boys. They don't understand things the same way that I do. So I have to tell them, I'm like, okay, guys, I know you want to insult the players and I know you want to swear at them, but no gendered insults. Okay. If you really want to say something, call them a potato, call them a pancake, call them, you know, something else that's not a gendered insult. There's no need for gendered insults. And they're like, okay. So they'll yell out like, you effing potato head. Or you effing, what did I say the other day to the Wellington fans? I don't know, I said something to Wellington the other day. But like, that's how we're taking it, because they like to yell, and I'm glad that they want to do something, they want to be involved, but I have to, you know, give them rules and boundaries that we have to compromise, because they want to swear. You know, some of the chants that get sung the loudest are the ones where they get to swear, because they feel like they're rebellious, because they're swearing at a women's game. Whereas last year, like, we didn't really do any swearing songs. We were like, nah, let's stop that. But then this year I was like, why not? Like, it's not a big deal. They get to swear at the men's game. Why can't I swear at this game? Like, I just want to enjoy myself. And that's why we're standing so far away from all the families and trying to get away from them so they can't complain too much. But my voice carries, and that's not my fault. There was something else I was going to say, but I forgot. But yeah, I compromise with the boys, and with that, they respect me a bit more. Oh, what I was going to say was, the game that I got kicked out in, there was no swearing, there was no insulting, so it was just a whole mess. Like, they can't even say that I was unruly or anything, because no one was swearing in that game, which was very funny.
100%. I guess we all want the game to grow, and we all want the game to grow in an image that is not, you know, that is welcoming. Madge, I'll throw to you on this one. Do you think that the growth of women's active will inevitably mean maybe needing more security, things like that. How do we address that as fans and as active support groups? And what do you see as the vision, I guess, moving forward?
Lots of questions in there. As far as assuming we keep growing and it keeps getting bigger, I think like Claire was saying with the differences with double headers and more crowds, I think as soon as you get masses of people, that's going to necessitate a certain level of security that comes in. As soon as things get bigger, the self-policing perhaps gets harder as well. So, I mean, those risk factors of, a bad actor coming in and causing issues in a natural, noisy and rambunctious space can increase. So I think it would be a natural progression. What we would hope to see, and I would hope to see this with men's active, is that security are properly trained to be able to tell the difference between what's just fun, what's just good-natured, versus what's an impending threat. I think that's probably what was missing in the game that Michelle experienced, because it did, from all reports, it sounded over the top. So I think as things grow, there's always going to be escalating levels of responsibility on all parts, on all sides, to ensure that, again, places are just safe spaces for players, for fans, for everyone, but for officials, for everyone involved in the game. What were the other questions? There was a few in that barrel.
There was a few in that barrel. Apologies. I guess just more about your vision for growth more generally, because I guess that's why I was tying it into the security. As we grow, as we get bigger in the women's game, I can only speak for myself. I would hate to see it superseded into a bigger sort of men's football picture. I think that we have an opportunity to sort of create our own thing. So please tell us your vision for this.
I think when you touched on it before about the so I think the double headers and the one club idea. So the APL have been very strong on the one club concept, and honestly, that's come across to me in a lot of respects as being everything that we do in the men. What would be fantastic for women is that we just replicate that with the women. That's really the messaging that I've been hearing, and that the active support in the men's should get along to the women's games. Well, why can't we foster an environment and a community that has grown up and enjoys the women's game? I liken it to, just because you're one club doesn't mean that your product all has to be the same thing. There are companies, if you're a chocolate company, you've got multiple chocolate bars that you sell. So it's like, why can't you differentiate? Why can't you have different markets that you attract? And there's always going to be crossover. I mean, I'm a Raw member. I go to the men's games as well. So it's not as though I'm exclusively an A-League women's fan. But I treat the two games separately. So I'll stand in the Den. I don't sit there and lecture the Den about how they should be doing their support. But then when I go to an A-League women's game, I like my A-League women's community, and I don't want to see that overridden in the pursuit of a cookie cutter one club identity, when it could be so much more, and the clubs could be diversifying their audience and who they actually appeal to in much smarter ways.
Yeah,
I think Madge, hit the nail on the head. The one club mentality could be our downfall. It's one club, but it's a very diverse fan base. You can't lump all the supporters together. We're a very diverse fan base at Newcastle, and thankfully for us, there is no expectation that two worlds collide in terms of active support. The boys do their thing, we do ours, and there's no issues, and they do it well, we do it well. and we respect each other's space at those games, and to this far it's been successful.
Kind of like, to me, with the one club mentality is fine. The way I see that is that you treat your women's team and give them access to the same facilities and coaching and nutrition and all that as you would the men's team. But then you need to listen to your fans of the women's game and understand the differences and celebrate those differences. And there's a bit of a risk to me of cannibalizing your audience. It's like, okay, well, the way to grow the women's game is to get the men's fans to come. And it's like, even in a perfect world, if that happened and they all came, I don't see how that's growing the game, because like from a club point of view, they're already going to be members, they're already going to be paying money into the club, so you're kind of not getting anything new. Like living in Melbourne, I've seen the success of the AFL women's, and they've been incredibly smart the way they've gone about it, because they recognised very on it was bringing a new audience, and have celebrated that and have encouraged that, and haven't tried to go down the road of trying to stop that from happening, And look, it's kind of picking up on something Michelle was saying before about, if they don't want to be at the game, I'm open in saying that I don't go to the men's games or whatever, but that's fine. I don't expect that just because you're a fan of the men's, victory, that you have to come to women. If you don't want to, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. We don't mind that. There's no one saying you have to, whatever. And I just think that you see with the Matildas, for example, and the new audience that has kind of tapped into. And it's like, okay, you're talking to them, you're finding out, do they follow a dub team? What made them go to the Matildas? What would make them go to a dub game? All those sorts of things. And I think the women's community is very unique in that, I'm a relative newcomer to it, but a lot of people have done some fantastic work way before my time in building up what the community has become. And everyone is like very invested in it and are absolutely willing to work with the authorities to help it grow. All that's kind of getting asked in return is you listen to us and be guided by us in your decision making, and don't try, as Matt said, don't go the cookie cutter approach of, okay, well, this is what we do in the men's, so we'll do the exact same thing, but we'll just change the word men to women.
And one of my other big bugbears about, it manifests itself largely in double headers, but it was talked about when they were talking about one club, how we have to make all the fans of the men's fans of the women's. We've had double headers for years. So many clubs have had double headers for years. They know. The men know about the women's game. If they haven't been showing up already, they don't have much of an interest to. So why would you make your strategy about building the women's game around that market and that market alone? And then my other big bugbear is that, why would you give away your women's product for free? So because you're an A-League men's member or a club member, like they like to call it now, but there was no change when they just decided to say it was a club membership, you get the women's games for free. Make people pay for the women's games. Value your product. And I don't mind the occasional double header when it's like a big event and you're actually putting it on as an event and really publicising it. But yeah, things like double headers, I think, make it difficult for us to build our own active space and our dedicated fan base for a myriad of reasons. We'd need a whole other podcast to go through all of those issues. But yeah, I think, I don't know what I think now. I went off on a tangent. There we go.
And good
I was
luck.
just going to say,
good luck even finding that there's a A-League women game on. You go to Ticketmaster and look for tickets for an A-League women game. If it's a double header, we get messages all the time from people saying we can't get tickets for the A-League women. Where is it? It's there, but it's not as a separate search on Ticketmaster. The link takes you to the men's game. Just little things like that we've been talking about for years. But you know, it's the value of the product, it's the value of the game. Things like that count, they matter.
I was just going to say, when we were talking about like security issues and stuff as well, part of the problem, what happened to me the other day was, and this is where it's beneficial to have a separate identity to the men's active, because what happened is that the men's active at a home game at that stadium, they all got mad because they were all told to get down from the seats. So in protest, they all went up on the seats, and then they were waiting for the next home game for the security to go hard, which happened to be a women's game, and it happened to be us. So they had all the police and all the security waiting for something to happen because they heard the Cove will be there, because that's what we're just affiliated under. And they said, okay, well, the Cove sits at the top, whereas like when I'm doing the active for the women's, I go down the bottom. And I was like, that's not my spot, that's not where we are. But they just assume that we are where the men usually go, and then obviously they hear that the men's active is going to be there, so then they come in and they're all heavy-handed on us. So that was part of the issue, and that's where it is beneficial to be separate from the men's active. But that's a whole other issue that I have that I cannot get into. But yes.
And look, Michelle, it is difficult to grow something new. You know, for us, it's taken time to build up what we have. And, you know, we still don't feel we have the growth that we would like. We still feel that we would, but that's part of a bigger picture, which is growth, attendance at A-League women games in general. It's really tricky to kick that process off and to get interest from people, and especially during COVID times as well. And I can't believe we've only mentioned COVID once in this whole podcast. But you know, where it's even more challenging, where imagine I talked about this last night, that you know the numbers drop off when things become a little bit scary and a little bit crazy again. So it's already challenging, and you have that as well. So to actually develop a group, it's tricky, and you really need that support from the club. But you need that, I guess they need to understand the cultural differences between A-League women, A-League men, active support, and what that looks like.
But it can be beneficial. I mean, because I think a lot of the men's support are trying hard and have made great progress over recent years in trying to stamp out some of the more aggressive and and discriminatory aspects of their behaviour. Maybe not quite where we'd like it to be in all aspects, but I mean, people grow, people. And so they're active. But I guess one of the benefits of starting something new is that you can start without the baggage that other groups have had, and you can start setting your own ground rules and your own vision from the very beginning, and be very clear about what that is, which is I think hugely beneficial in such a contested space.
Absolutely, and I think Claire has mentioned this a few times, and she's absolutely correct about, you know, it's really important to establish a good relationship with your club, because as soon as you do that and you get down and you get the opportunity to speak to them, they're actually very understanding of the differences and will be quite happy to work with you. And I mean, I can only speak from my experiences, but yeah, in terms of security, etc., we've never had any problems at all, and it's all fine. And yeah, this season at Amy, there's been the usual checks when we take the drum just to check that's been cleared with the club. That's fine. We don't mind that. They've got to do what they've got to do. But prior to that, it's always just been waved through or whatever, because the club's got a great relationship. They've spoken to the security and told them they know we don't cause any trouble or anything. And so it's just straight on through. So I think that's important. And yeah, it is, it is really great, because kind of what I migrated across to the women's game from the men's game is I got to the point when I felt that I didn't really connect anymore, and I didn't kind of feel a part of that community, because men's sport in Australia can be quite the macho culture at times, and that's not something that I've ever particularly kind of felt comfortable with. And so it's been quite rewarding to play a very small part in trying to, build something for the future.
I would like to say that I do have a good relationship with the club, and what happened the other day was not the club's fault in any way. That was stadium security that's run by the council. So the club was on it like instantly as soon as they saw that I was the one that was getting kicked out. Danny Townsend was very much not happy about the situation. So yeah, like the club and I, we're sweet. Like we've got a very good relationship. And it was not the club's fault. It's just the security at the stadium that had issues. They had issues with the Cove in the past. This is not the first time, but hopefully it was the last. And yeah, the men's active has been a lot better in terms of stamping out any sort of racism and homophobia, which actually happened not long ago, and because of that there was a punch up. So not the best way to handle it, but it was handled. So anyways, Taryn, back to you.
Men. Oh my goodness. All right, I wanted to end on a wholesome note. So I'm gonna ask everyone this question in 1 minute or less, if you can. What has active support for your club brought to your life? Claire, we'll start with you.
Oh, well, for starters, I don't have a lot of free time. I feel like everything's just football at the moment. And it's pre-football, it's football, it's post-football. But no, in all seriousness, it's brought to me as someone who wasn't born in this country and who's relatively new, almost 10 years I've been here. It's really helped me connect with the country that I call home. It's really helped me connect with people in the city that I love and that I call home. And it's really helped me meet a lot of new people, have fun at the football, support a team that I really value. A lot of local women on our team who are just exceptional role models in our community, but also excellent players. Yeah, it's something that I get a lot of enjoyment out of. I've met a lot of great people, built a lot of good connections, and game day for me is fun. It's seeing familiar faces. It's seeing people that I might not see all year round apart from the football. It's like, yeah, meeting up with old mates. So I enjoy it. And if we win, then it's the best thing in the world.
Awesome. Simon?
Yeah, I'd say the biggest thing for me is like a sense of belonging, like a community, like the amazing amount of people that I've managed to meet and made a lot of new friends. It's given me a further ability to continually quote Simpsons as much as I possibly can, which has always been a big part of my life. And of course, the most obvious thing that it's done is has brought a giant Homer into my life, courtesy of my nephew Seamus, who I'm forever be grateful for giving him to me.
We love Homer and Marge. Madge?
I think we're going to be a bit of a broken record here, but yeah, I think that that community and sense of belonging is really a huge part of, I think, any sporting culture. There is that element of sense of community, but I guess what's really different is that it's not just a community just with my club. It is a women's football community nation and even internationally as well. But yeah, when the Jets come up, when if Claire and her crew come up to Brisbane, we have a beer and and we hang out and we have a good time. So that hugely that sense of community, I think, is the number one. And probably the other is I'm an accountant by day. So getting the chance to exercise the creative side of the brain and do a little bit of painting of banners and stuff like that is great fun. It's just, it broadens what you're looking forward to in your life. Everyone's working, everyone's sort of like trying to make a living and get through things. So just having some fun times with friends and football and all of the paraphernalia that surrounds that is just a hell of a lot of fun.
Awesome. Last but not least, Michelle?
It has given me clout. No. I wouldn't be me if I wasn't some sort of narcissist.
Get those Instagram likes, Michelle.
Exactly.
You might be seeing the generational divide here.
Yeah,
I'm getting the followers from the team. The team's following back on Instagram. No, it's good to have that relationship with the team though, with the girls, and like having them like, you know, come up to us at the end of the game, celebrate with us. You know, that to me is super important, is, you know, making sure that they know that that we appreciate how they play, and when they win a game, even if they lose or draw or whatever, that they know that we're there for them and supporting them. And it's great to see like a bunch of young boys wanting to be a part of it and messaging me being like, hey, can I play the drums this week? Can I do this? You know, when can we do this? Like, are you going to the game? It's nice to have, you know, to see a young group of boys actually want to be a part of women's football. So yeah, I'm enjoying that.
Fantastic. Okay, well, we'll wrap it up there. Thank you, everyone, for coming on today. It's really, really appreciated at pretty short notice. To everyone that's listened or watched, please leave your questions for us. We'd love to hear them. As we've mentioned so many times, it creates a whole community. We have a whole community here, and it takes all of us to create the kind of culture that we want, and the kind of fun, active support that will draw more of us into our community. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Taryn.
I don't know how to end. I'll just leave it there.
End the song.
Someone can edit.
Kumbaya.
It's been.
Everybody hold hands.
Whoa, that's the one. Go on, Michelle, get the hand. Go on, Michelle. Whoa, come on.
No, get thrown out of the house.
Get on your chair. Get on your chair.
I'll leave you with
My
these
mum will push
words.
me out.
I'll leave you with some words of wisdom. English. Who needs English? I'm never going to England.